So if I want to fetch all of the instructors in a collection, I can use the find command to do that. So I can say, let's say all instructors is equal to the instructors collection dot find. And then the parameters to find are going to be basically, there's going to be a query here, which I'm going to write in the form of a dictionary, because everything's a dictionary to Mongo. And so if you want to write a query, you have to specify a dictionary. But here, if you leave that empty, it's just going to return all of the documents in this collection. And then what it's actually going to return, unfortunately, is an iterable that you can loop over. And if you print it, it's going to look like this, print all instructors. It's going to look like some sort of iterable. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to turn the iterable into a list and print that. So let's run the code now. And so what we got was, so here's the collection. Here's what I added with the ID added to the end of there. Then what I got from doing this is a PyMongo cursor. So you might remember from 133Y that in order to run a select statement on Microsoft SQL Server using PyODBC, we needed to create a cursor object, and then we could use the cursor to execute a SQL command, and then we could also use the cursor to read the results. It's the same concept here. This is like a select statement that's returning some rows, except it's a find statement that's returning some documents. And then to access the cursor, when I convert it into a list, I can either do for document in this cursor and then do something for each document, or I can just convert the whole cursor into a list of documents. So what I got here is this document, which goes all the way up to here. And then this document with a different ID. So this one ends FCB0, and this one ends 15BF. So those are two separate documents with two separate IDs. So here's a second document for Rocco Charamella. And then here's a third document with yet another ID for Rocco Charamella. And here's a fourth document for Rocco Charamella. So why do I have 4? Okay, if you go back and you watch this video, and you're here, so you won't, but if you did, you would see that I actually ran this line of code 4 times so far. And each time I executed this line of code, it added a document to this collection and assigned a new ID to it. And nothing in this code causes those things to go away. And because I inserted them separately, they all got new IDs. I didn't specify an ID. And so I end up basically with 4 copies of the same document. And if I run it again, and now I have 5 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I have 5 of them. So you can keep adding the same document to the collection over and over and over again. And as long as it doesn't have an ID column, it's going to do what it's doing here, which is basically make a new ID and treat it as a completely new document. So how do I get rid of all of these things? Well, I'll show you that in a minute. But what I'm going to do first is, well, what happens if you specify an ID? So under ID colon, and then for this one, I'll do Charamella, comma, Rocco A. And this is going to be my key for referring to instructors. So each instructor is going to have a unique last name, comma, first name, middle initial. And if I have two instructors with exactly the same last name, first name, and middle initial, then I'm going to force one of them to change their name or their middle initial, because some things just cannot be tolerated. And having two people with exactly the same name cannot be tolerated. So what happens if I run it? Well, the first time I run it, nothing bad happens. If I go to the last one, which is the last one I added, and I look at the ID, you'll see the ID is Sharamella, comma, Rocco A. No problem there. It's not an object ID at all. It's just a piece of text now because that's what I specified. So everybody's happy in the world. And then if I run this one more time, oops. So I get an error, E11,000 duplicate key error collection course instructors.instructors. And then the index ID dupe key, there's the ID, that's a duplicate. So bottom line here is that if you try to add a document with the same ID as another document that's already in the collection, that is one of the few errors that you can get when working with MongoDB. So you are not allowed to have two documents with the same ID. What you want to do instead is come up with a unique ID for this new instructor, or if you're actually trying to change the values associated with a document that's already in the collection, that's not an insert, that's an update. So there's a separate command called update that will let you change the properties of a document that's already in the collection. Okay, so let's go ahead and, so what do I want to do here? Before I start adding instructors, I want to make sure that the collection is empty. So this thing here, this is going to get the instructors collection, including any documents that are in there already. But what I want to do before that is say db.instructors.drop. So the way you get rid of a collection is by dropping it, and that will kill the collection entirely, including any documents that are stored in it. And then what this will do will basically make a new empty instructors collection that I can add documents to. And that's all I need to do here. So now when I run the code, I get back my list of instructors that includes Charmella Rocco A, and only that, because I've only added one instructor to the collection so far. And then I am going to use for key, doesn't really matter, but for now, let me go ahead and add. So what I'm going to do here in my course instructors UI, when I specify an instructor to add to the database, I ask the user, what is the instructor's first name? What is the instructor's last name? And then I use the search method on the instructor list, all instructors, to find whether there's an instructor with that name. And if there is, I say there's already an instructor with that name. Do I want to add them to the list, yes or no? And if not, then I know I'm going to need to make a new instructor. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm using the combination of first name, last name as a unique identifier for each instructor. And so that's what I'm going to use for the ID as well. Now, I don't necessarily have to, but it may save me some work later on, may not make a difference at all. But for now, let's do Rocco Sharamella. All right, so let's go to the instructor lists and find all of our instructors. Course instructors UI. Here's all of my instructors. And I'm going to do this in Notepad++ because find and replace in Notepad using regular expressions is a thing. And what I'm going to do here is, space star. Um, so that is the part-time instructor or full-time instructor. That's like PC equal full-time instructor, open paren. And this is probably backwards. I probably have to escape the actual ones, but not those. So let's see. It might take me a couple of tries to get this right. So I have double quote, open paren, not double quote, star. Don't worry if this is gibberish. Comma, double quote, not double quote, star, double quote, comma, double quote, star, and G number. So what I'm doing is I'm writing a pattern that hopefully will match each of these lines, and we'll grab this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and that thing as separate values that I can use to write my dictionary. And this is probably harder than it needs to be. But we like to do a lot of hard work in order to avoid a small amount of easy work. Okay, so then what I'm going to replace this with is PC, which is \1 equals \n is new line, 4 spaces, and then I have under ID colon, and then I have first name, which is, this is 1, 2, 3, space, last name, comma, \n, and then type is double quote \2, comma, \n, 4 spaces, and then first name is \3, comma, \n, and then last name is \4, comma, \n, 4 spaces, and then middle initial is \5, comma, \n, 4 spaces, and then G number is \6, comma, actually no comma there, \n, and then close off my dictionary. And so there's my dictionaries. Anyone want to express shock that that actually worked the first time?
That was pretty good. I'm learning how to do some of these regular expressions in Linux right now, and That was way better than I would have done.
Well, I am shocked too. So that worked out better than I could have hoped. But if you do something often enough over a long enough period of time, eventually you get better at it. Okay, so now I could add each of these one at a time and get the IDs and set the IDs by basically just repeating this loop here. But in addition to insert one, there's actually insert many. And so I'm going to use insert many here. And then the many is going to be a list of documents. And so my list is going to be, what do I have? I should have done this. PCIEREJFDH NIGJMG NIGJMG, and that's it. Okay, so that's my list of all instructors, and that's what I'm going to pass into insert many. And then what it's going to return is going to be a result object that has inserted IDs, I think. And and I could go through each one and assign it to the dictionary, but if I think it's easier to just go ahead and do this find in this case. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the find and then print the collection and then print the list of instructors. So go ahead and run it. So here's my list of instructors. And then what I can do here, so print instructors, colon, and then for instructor, all instructors, print instructor. Okay, so there's my instructors, and you can see some of them are part-time and full-time, and the names should all match: first name, last name, middle initial. The only one I really know is my own, and then G numbers.